I would love to understand how petrol pumps function. My understanding of this, and we've not discussed the numbers, or we've not discussed what data Sahil has. My understanding of this is a petrol is a pure trading business, right? You get petrol at a certain cost, you give it at a certain cost, and you make a margin. It's a volume based business. The margins are extremely small. It's a volume based business. And who gets into it? People who already have a land. Because from what I understand, if you have to buy a land today and set up a petrol pump, it is extremely unaffordable at the current price. You're not going to, it's going to take ages to break even. So people who have cheap land set up petrol pumps, and it's a good cash cow. That's my understanding as an outsider. Never, never really known how petrol pumps work, but go for it.
As you were talking about batteries and battery swapping and battery charging and all of that stuff, I realized that the model in which petrol pumps operate right now can be a model for which battery charging and battery swapping could work in the future. And that's why I feel like it's important to look at how this infrastructure works right now so that we can see in the future, okay, does this make sense for another industry? And yeah, I think a lot of the points that you made right now are completely true. That pat sorry that petrol pumps are a pure trading business. The margins are very low. Margins are just purely 2 to 3%. But the thing is that, like you said, it's a cash cow, right? It's a very set business. Once you start getting the money in, it's not going to vary too much. You're going to get about the same amount of money every week. You don't have to worry about it. It's predictable. And if you have the capital, if you have the land, then I don't see why not, right? So we'll talk about the numbers in detail so that I can convince at least somebody that, hey, maybe setting up a petrol pump is not that bad of an idea. Okay, so I'm warning everybody right now. We're going to go into exquisite detail about petrol pumps right now. So the next 30
Okay.
minutes.
Sahil, what I want out of this is next time I'm drinking with my friends, I should be able to have a very interesting conversations around petrol pumps and give them drop facts that they would not have known at all. So I'm hoping, give us that data.
Trust me, I will. So first, let me tell you about where I got this data from, right? So I was just chatting with some guy I went to college with, not you, Siddharth, some other guy I went to college with. And it turns out that he was starting a business in the petrochemical trading part of the world, right? And I'll talk about that later. He's setting up a cloud petrol pump, which is really strange idea, but we'll talk about that at the end. And the reason he wanted to get into this was because he worked with Tata Motors Finance for 4 years, where he was handling fuel loans, he was handling diesel loans, and he was working directly with Indian Oil and Hindustan Petroleum. And he's also been doing this cloud petrol pump for the last year or so. And in the first 6 months of this cloud petrol pump, he did 7 to 8 crores of revenue, which is super impressive for any business to make such fast revenue. So he knows quite a bit about petrol pumps, and we started talking about it, and he just sent me 20 minutes or 30 minutes worth of voice notes about how petrol pumps work. I transcribed all of those voice notes, and then I wrote it out, and now I have a full script. So I'm going to tell you now about what we're going to discuss, right? So we're going to discuss everything about petrol pumps, including how much money you need to set it up, including how much money you can expect to make every month, the basics of how you can set up a petrol pump, the capital you need to set it up, the different business models and the margins you can expect for the different business models, the differences between a urban petrol pump, a rural petrol pump, a transport hub petrol pump, how the sales break up between these different petrol pumps of petrol versus diesel, the operating expenses, and the working capital that you need to run a petrol pump. So, Siddharth, does this meet your expectations of the kind of conversation you want to have with a friend? I'm going to give you
Absolutely.
all the numbers.
Absolutely. Go for it.
This is, similar to that the business of helicopter rental we did a long time ago. It kind of reminds me of that. But anyway, so I'm going to talk about the numbers that my friend gave me, and big thank you to Saransh Teku. I'm going to talk about his business at the end. Okay, so let's talk about the basics first. Where do you get your petrol from? You get your petrol from these things that are called oil marketing companies. There are six major oil marketing companies in India. These three of them are owned by the government, and three of them are private. The three that are owned by the government are Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, and Hindustan Petroleum. And the three ones that are private are called Shell, Reliance Jio, and Nayara. So Nayara used to be ESSAR oil until it got bought over by a Russian company called Rosneft, and then it became Nayara. Okay. So if you want to start a petrol pump, you need to approach one of these, they call oil marketing companies, or I will now call them OMCs. Okay. You approach one of these OMCs and you tell them, hey, I want to set up a petrol pump. Can you help me set up a petrol pump? And then, and obviously it's not that easy. I asked my friend, how do you actually approach these OMCs? He did not reply to that question. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to the question, how do you actually approach them? But once you approach them, then there are two major ways that you can actually build a petrol pump with the OMC.
I just
First
want
of
to
all,
add, sorry, I just want to add one thing here, Sahil. This is something that I know. A lot of the petrol pumps are actually, especially for the government ones, are through tenders. So the government puts out these oil marketing companies put out a tender saying that we need it roughly in this area, anybody who wants to set it up in that area, and that's when they invite applications. What you can do through, knowing the right people is get the right tender placed, right? Get the right tender placed in a way where wherever you have the land, wherever you have the opportunity, the tender comes out for that particular region or area. That's how it generally works.
if anybody has done tenders in India, you know that the way to do tenders in India is you get the tender written as per what you need. That's just the open secret of tendering in India. Anyways, so okay. So the tender comes out, and what you have to give to the oil marketing company is they require 17 gunthas. So what is a guntha? A guntha is around 1,000 square feet approximately. So you have to give them 17,000 square feet to the oil marketing company. And this is why Siddharth said that a petrol pump is a game of real estate, right? And we're going to go into the details of how much land costs in different parts of the country so we can see whether that statement is actually true. Okay, so you have to give them 17,000 square feet. Once you do that, you have to sign a 29-year contract with the OMC saying that for the next 29 years, this land can only be a petrol pump. That's it, nothing else. It can't be anything else except for except for a petrol pump for the next 29 years. You sign that with the oil marketing company and with the local municipal authority, because the municipal authorities have to plan cities according to where all the petrol pumps are. Yeah, makes sense. Now, this land is allocated for a petrol pump. It cannot be changed for the next 29 years. The other problem is that usually in India, when you buy land, a very common thing to do is to take a loan against property on the land, because you still have control over the land. But banks do not give loans against property against a petrol pump, because the banks cannot take ownership because they cannot run the petrol pump. So no bank will give you loan against property against a petrol pump. So that is a big negative of running a petrol pump. You cannot use that capital to then use it somewhere else, right? That is a problem for some people. Now let's get into the economics of petrol pumps. So I'll give an example. So the guy I spoke to, Saransh, he wanted to set up a pump near Navi Mumbai, near the Port Trust in Navi Mumbai. And his economics would have basically worked out that to buy a 17 gunta piece of land, it was priced at about 7 lakhs per gunta, and that would have been around a crore and a half per for the land itself. Now, on this land, you need to build about 1 crore worth of infrastructure. So that means you need to build the underground tanks, and you need to build the canopy. The canopy is basically that big thing that you see above the ground, where it'll say Indian Oil and the roof and all of that stuff, right? And building all of this costs around a crore. The underground tanks, the canopy, blah, blah, blah. Now, you have two choices. You can either pay for the tanks and the canopy yourself. If you pay for it yourself, you become a dodo. A dodo is not an extinct bird from Madagascar. A dodo basically means dealer owned, dealer operated, in which case your margins will be a little different than if you let the oil marketing company do it, right? You have the second option, where you can say that I will give you this land, but I do not want to do that 1 crore of expense. So you give it to the OMC, and that can be Indian Oil, it can be Reliance, whoever it is, and the OMC will do the 1 crore expense, but then they will also operate the pump, right? So whoever does the expense operates the pump. In that case, you will become a DOCO dealer. So that is dealer owned, company operated. Um, so there's also the option that you can just get rent, right? Where it's a DOCO arrangement, and they just pay you rent instead of giving you a margin of the petrol that is sold. The rent can be anywhere from 50,000 to 2 lakhs per month, depending on on the location of the land, right? So what are the margins that I'm talking about? If you're a DODO, which is a dealer owned, dealer operated, the margins are: petrol you get 2.8 rupees, diesel you get 1.8 rupees per liter sold. If you're a DOCO, you get zero point 0.5 rupees on petrol, and you get 0.25 rupees of diesel for every liter sold. So currently in Bombay, the price of petrol is around 110 rupees. So that means the margins on the Dodo side of things is around 2.6%, and for diesel is around 1.7%. Right? I hope this makes sense up till now, Siddharth. You getting it? Cool.
Yep.
Okay. Now let's go a little bit more into detail. We've gone through the capital requirements. We've gone through the basic gross margins that you can expect to earn. Now let's discuss the minimum requirement of petrol that you have to sell. Now, when we discuss the minimum requirement of petrol that you have to sell, then we will go into the revenue you can expect, the total gross margin you can expect, and the operating profits that you can expect from running a petrol pump, right? So first, there's a term. It's called 1 kiloliter of fuel, and in the business they call it a kilo, right? So KL, from anybody who remembers the 8th standard science, is 1,000 liters. So 5 KL is 5,000 liters of petrol, of diesel, of whatever it is. So according to all of these guys, IOCL, HPCL, whatever, you have to do a minimum of 170 KL per month per location to qualify to sell the fuel. If you can't do that minimum amount, they will take the petrol pump away from you. So 170 KL is a basic necessity. On average, people generally do around 250 to 300 KL. In places like Bombay, in places like Delhi, that will obviously be higher because there will be more traffic coming in there. Um, sorry, you have a question?
If I'm not able to meet that demand and the petrol
Yeah.
pump goes away, does that condition of 29 years of setting this land can only be a petrol pump for 29 years still stay? Because that will be a horrible place to be in.
Yeah, I think so. I think what it happens is I think it shifts to a DOCO dealership, where it is now company operated, because you're clearly shown that you can't operate it properly. They probably did the study beforehand to say that there is demand. You're clearly not able to satisfy that demand for whatever reason, right? So yeah, I think you're still locked into that, which is very unfortunate because you can't even take a loan against that property, right? So you can't use that capital for anything else. Anyway, um, so yeah, in Bombay and Delhi, that you'll be selling more than 300,000, 300 KL per month of petrol, diesel, whatever it is. Now, before we do a daily breakup of how much petrol are you selling, how much diesel are you selling, let's look at the difference between an urban petrol pump, a rural petrol pump, and a transport hub petrol pump. So these are the three major types of petrol pumps. It's important to understand this before we go further, right? So a city petrol pump, it's obvious. It's a city, it's a petrol pump that's in the middle of a city. I don't really need to explain that anymore. But over here in the city, generally the petrol sales are higher than a diesel sale. And this is fantastic for a petrol pump owner because you're making a 2.8 rupee margin on petrol, while your margin on diesel is only 1.8 rupees, while the price difference between petrol and diesel is not that much, right? So obviously you'd rather sell petrol than selling diesel. And yeah, and the second big thing is that in the city you're generally selling to consumers. So these are people who will come in, they will fill their tank for 5,000 rupees, whatever, and they will pay you immediately. There is no credit that you're giving, right? The biggest downside to a city petrol pump, and this is obvious, and this goes back to what you were saying, Siddharth, about owning the land, is that the price of the land that you're sitting on is worth way more than the money that you will make. I'll discuss the operating margins in a bit. But for example, let's say I want to start a pump in Bombay, right? Let's say I want to start a pump in Bandra. If I want to start a pump in South Bombay, I need 17 to 18,000 square feet, which is a lot in the city. But you won't get a land parcel that is exactly 17,000 or exactly 18,000 square feet, right? So that means I will have to buy at least 20,000, maybe 22,000 square feet. And that means I'm making an investment of 150 crores just to set up a petrol pump. And that money is stuck for the next 29 years. And I will get into the exact breakup in some time, but generally you can expect to make maybe 15, 20 lakhs per month. Is that really worth it? um, for 150 crores of investment? I don't really think so. And that 15 lakhs I just mentioned is a gross profit. It's not even a net profit. So it's a huge investment for, I think, not enough gross profit. Now, that's where the business model breaks down for city pumps. And that's why, Siddharth, I think you're right when you were saying that it makes sense if you own land already to start a petrol pump. But that is true for a city petrol pump. Now, let's talk about a rural petrol pump, right? Again, in a rural petrol pump, you're selling more petrol than you are selling diesel. Because bikes are far more abundant in a rural petrol pump. And also, land is much cheaper, right? To buy 17,000 square feet in a rural area, you're not going to pay 100 crores. You're probably going to pay maybe 50,000 rupees, a lakh, maybe a little bit more per gunta, right? It's not that expensive. The third model is the transport hub. Uh, a transport hub is near the city or it's in the city and is generally where land is cheap and it's close to like a port or an airport or something like that, right? In Bombay, it would have been in Navi Mumbai, near the Mumbai Port Trust, near the airport or something like that. And this is mostly you're selling diesel, and you have to give credit to all your customers because these are all transporters, and that really impacts your working capital cash flow, and that has a huge impact on the total capital requirements. Now let's do a breakup of the operating incomes for each one of these different types of models. Okay, now let's say you're talking about a city
I just
petrol
have
pump.
one. Sorry, I have one thought.
Yeah.
I've spoken to a few petrol pump owners in my life in general, and one of the things that they've said is the credit to transporters is a double-edged sword, right? As you said, it increases the working capital requirements, but what it also does is it makes the transporters complete fleet dependent on your petrol pump. And you're talking about trucks and buses and these vehicles that take a lot of petrol or diesel, right? So you get to bill a lot of amount, but the two risks is the higher working capital requirement, and the second is the risk of bad debt, because you're
Yeah.
in such low margin business. And I come from a family that has been in the transport business or been around the transport business. I've seen other transporters, people with 30, 40, 50 fleets. These are not the most pleasant people to deal with when it comes to recovering your money. Let's just say that, right?
Yeah.
If somebody has bad intentions, they will screw you over in this industry. So there's, as soon as you start talking about giving credit to transporters, there's some muscle power that you need to have in order to make sure you get your money back, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I was 100% going to talk about this later as well. But also, I have friends in the transport industry, and what they've told me is that most transporters are small companies. They own one truck, two trucks, three trucks, right? And the rate of these companies going bankrupt is very high. So that is a giant risk. And I will talk about it when we talk about working capital. But yeah, you made a fantastic point. So going into the actual operating expenses of each one of these business models, I hope, Siddharth, I'm going into enough detail for your next dinner party with all of your
100%.
petrol pump owners.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope it's understandable also. Yeah. Okay. So let's say for a city petrol pump in Bombay, right? So on average, let's say you're selling 600 KL per month. 75% of that is going to be petrol, 25% of that is going to be diesel. That's important because the margins are different on petrol and diesel. But 600 kl means you're doing 20 kl daily. So that's 15 kl of petrol and 5 kl of diesel. 15 kl of petrol means that you're earning 42,000 rupees from petrol. 5 kl of diesel means you're earning 8,000 rupees of gross profit every day. So that's 50,000 rupees gross profit daily. I love how these numbers add up so nicely. But in a month, 50,000 per day is 15 kl, 15 lakhs of gross profit. Okay, this is still just gross profit. On the cost side, the biggest expense is salaries, right? Because in a large petrol pump like this that is doing 600 kl, you need around 40 people. You'll be paying about 30 of them 15,000 per month, and you'll have 10 managers that you're paying about 25,000 per month. So these 30 attendants, they will be earning around, the cost for 30 attendants will be about 4.5 lakhs per month. For those 10 managers, accountants, operations people, the total cost will be about 2.5 lakhs per month. So that's a total monthly expense of 7 lakhs. And that means your operating profit per month is 8 lakhs per month, which is not bad. It's almost a crore a year. But remember, this is for a city petrol pump. So that means you invested a significant amount of money in the land. Um, Now, let's just talk about the working capital to run this pump, right? So, if you have to sell 20,000 liters per day, that means you need to have the tanks. And you need at least 2 days worth of diesel and petrol, right? Which is going to be about 30 to 40,000 liters for the petrol, and you need about 20,000 liters for the diesel. And these tanks need to be full. So that basically means at the current prices, which is around 100 rupees, you need to have about 60 lakhs invested in the fuel that is stored in your tanks. And in fact, 60,000 liters is probably a lower number. Other people probably have more number of days that they have this storage. Now, the OMCs don't give you any credit whatsoever. So you're basically paying for this in cash. So this 60 lakhs is part of your working capital and you need it. And then once we go into the transport hubs, working with the transporters, I'm going to talk about how your working capital requirement goes significantly higher than even 60 lakhs. But for a city petrol pump, let's say 60 lakhs, if you're storing for 2 days, let's say maybe it is 1.5 crores, maybe 3 crores, depending on how much petrol you're storing, how many days worth of petrol you're storing, right? Um, yeah. Anyway, um, the OMCs will not give you credit. You have to pay for the petrol as you buy it. BPCL, HPCL, IOCL, the government-owned petrol pumps, OMCs, they give you credit from the 25th of March to the 31st of March every year so that you can do your finances better, but that's about it. And the thing is that if you're even a single day late, you become blacklisted. So lots of pumps don't even take that credit period because they don't want to get blacklisted from the OMCs. Okay, does the economics of a city petrol pump make sense now? Right?
Yeah.
So you need a crore, you need 2 crores of working capital. You're earning around a crore of profit a year, and let's say you have invested about 20 crores in the land. So your total capital investment is around 22 crores. And so that means 1 divided by 20 or 1 divided by 25. That means your return on capital is only 4%, which is does not make sense from an economics point of view. City petrol pumps do not make sense, right? If those are your numbers. Obviously, it depends city to city, but I think that's average we can take.
So buying a new land and setting up a city petrol pump makes absolutely no sense. But if you already have land, bought years ago, ages ago, and you don't, for whatever reason, have time or the capital to, develop that land further, but you want to keep it in your possession, petrol pumps are a great way to monetize it, right? Because your cost that's going to go in is just the working capital and the setup structure cost, whatever, right? And then you're suddenly seeing a very healthy cash flow profitable business that's being generated within the city. You don't even have to give credit. So a nice location which is not well served from a petrol pump perspective, if you have a land, which is probably not going to happen in Bombay, because I don't think there are empty parcels of land anymore in Bombay within
Yeah.
the city. So, but any other upcoming city, and I've seen that a lot in Indore and other tier 2 cities where you can predict where the city is expanding, and a lot of these cities are expanding. So you can predict where the cities are expanding, and you if you already have land there, or even it might make sense to even buy now, in the tier two case, and suddenly you will see 5 7 years down the line you are in the part of city which is fairly busy, and therefore your cash flow is going to be very very healthy. I've actually seen petrol pump owners getting into this business and then realizing that this is the best business ever, and then setting up multiple petrol pumps. So I've seen that example for sure, and I think that if you take the current land cost out of it, it's a great business, or if you can figure out cheap land.
Yeah. If you can predict the future, then your children maybe could have a really nice, profitable, predictable cash flow business. But yeah,
Yeah, it's like
it's
that
it's a risk.
mango. It's like that mango tree thing, right? If you're going to be sowing a mango tree, your kids or your great grand or great or your grandkids are the ones who are going to be enjoying the mangoes.
Dude, so my just a slight sidestep. My grandfather built a factory in what was the mangroves at that time of Bombay in 1963, and now that factory is in the middle of the city, and it's about half an acre of land. So it's a yeah. That
Yeah.
was the mango tree that my grandfather planted, and
Yeah.
now yeah, it's reaping huge rewards. But yeah, anyways, sorry. Going back to petrol pumps because petrol pumps are more interesting than my life. Rural petrol pumps are super interesting. Like I said, the land is really cheap, but they have certain challenges, right? Um, let's just talk a little bit about the land first. It's going to cost you about 15 20 lakhs to buy the land. It's going to be about 70 to 80,000 or a lakh to buy the land per gunta. So about 15 to 20 lakhs. You're going to average at least 170,000 liters per month, which is going to lead to about 4 to 5 lakhs of gross profits. And you're going to have maybe 10 attendants, maybe two managers. You're going to have about a lakh and a half of monthly expenses because even the cost of people over there is less than in the cities. So you can expect maybe 2 to 3 lakhs of operating income per month from a rural pump. Now, it's a good business. It's not as you're not making as much money, but you're also not putting as much money into it. The biggest problem when it comes to rural petrol pumps, and so that you're not going to be surprised by this at all, is that it's just not safe. The problem is that people try and steal your petrol and diesel a lot. And as a result, the owner of a rural petrol pump needs to live somewhere close by and they need to have some kind of political connection. Because what happens a lot is like these gundas, they will fill their bike, they will fill their scooter, and they will just refuse to pay the diesel or the petrol cost. They will basically challenge you like what are you going to do, and your attendant who's getting paid 10,000 a month is not going to risk their life for that, right? And that is the biggest challenge, and that's why for a rural petrol pump you need to be somebody who's politically connected, or it's a strong man in the village, or is a part of the panchayat or something. And that is the biggest problem when it comes to rural petrol pumps. Otherwise, profit wise, setting it up is great.
I
um,
have a wild
yeah,
idea. A
yeah.
holding company that sets up rural petrol pumps but gives part ownership to the panchayat leader, or an influential person in that particular rural region, and you just give them ownership to make sure that the thing is safe, and you have a holding company that has a bunch of assets in a business that is fairly profitable. You never know, it could work.
So this is a question I had for my friend. Again, a question he didn't answer. Um, is that, and I'm not blaming him for not answering. By the way, he sent me about 30 minutes of worth of voice notes, so I'm not blaming him for not answering this question. Is are there chains of petrol pumps? Like, are there chains of big holding companies of petrol pumps where they own like 100, 200 petrol pumps? From my experience, I don't think so because I've never heard of these. But it is a model that makes sense, and it is a pure capital model. You just need to have the capital, go out, raise some money, and you need somebody who's a pure operator who goes out and can just talk to the panchayats in their language, and yeah, and gets it done. That's what you need, and I think this is a fantastic business.
I think the only flaw in the argument that you made is raise some money, right? Because who do you raise from? The banks are not going to give you the money.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't make sense for an equity investor to invest in this because the margins are such that it barely, it's a good profitable business if you're putting in your own cash.
and,
I
and
don't know if
it's
it
it's
makes
not
sense.
sexy. It's
It's
not
not
sexy.
sexy at all. Yeah, you're not going to
Yeah.
hear about it in the Economic Times page 3 startup gossip page. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Shark Tank will not like that either. But yeah, I think if you have the equity, it makes sense. But yeah, the third and the final model is the transport hub, right? So transport hubs, why do they exist? They exist for trucks. They exist for trucks to come in and fill up. The price of land is obviously not going to be as much as in a city. The price of land might be about 1 to 5 crores. Like I spoke about my friend, the price of land that he wanted was about 1.2 crores. The volumes here, though, are much higher than in a city petrol pump or a rural petrol pump. It's usually going to be 1,000 kiloliters, 1,500 kiloliters, even 2,000 kiloliters is very achievable for a transport hub. The biggest challenge for a transport hub is credit, like we spoke about before. But first, let's just look at the gross profits. Let's look at the operating income. So let's say 1,500 kiloliters.
Rush through this because you've said the it's the same model. So just rush through the numbers.
Yeah, I'm going to rush to the numbers. Okay. So 1,500 kiloliters, all is going to be diesel. So you're looking at gross profit of around 27 lakhs monthly, and you're going to get about 24 and a half lakhs of profit. Depending on assumptions on attendance and all of that stuff. If you're doing 1,000 kl, you're looking at about 17 to 18 lakhs monthly as gross profit. If you have 2,000 kl, then you're looking at about 30 lakhs per month of profit. Now let's just look at the credit as the killer, right? So let's say out of 1,500 kl, around 1,000 to 1,200 kl is on credit. So 1,200 kl at 100 rupees per liter, that's 12 crores per month of fuel that you're giving on credit. And if you're giving 15 days of credit, which is probably quite reasonable, even 30 days in some cases, you're looking at an additional 6 crores of working capital to run the business. If it's 30 days of credit, then that becomes an additional 12 crores of working capital. Now, bear with me. I'm just going to look at what the return on capital would be for the amount of capital that you're investing into a transport hub petrol pump. So let's say you're making 25 lakhs of monthly profit. So that's 3 crores of annual profit. And your working capital, sorry, your capital investment is 6 crores for the land plus whatever it cost for the building the shed, etc., plus another couple of crores for the working capital, right? So that's 9 crores of capital, and 3 crores of profit. So that's a return of capital of 33%. In my opinion, that's a solid return on capital. You could argue that the net income will be even low because of some other expensive, but then 2 crores of profit on 9 crores of capital is still 22% return on capital, which I think is fantastic. If my working capital becomes 9 crores or 12 crores plus 3 crores of land and building, etc., then my return on capital is still 17% or 13%. All of these calculations are in my notes. The notes will be in the show notes. You can read them all. But whatever the return on capital is, 33%, 22%, 17%, 13%, this is still decent for a relatively risk-free investment, right? Because everybody needs to buy fuel, and buying fuel is very predictable. You're going to get this cash on a regular basis. So in my opinion, the biggest risk when it comes to transport hubs is, like Siddharth mentioned, is the default from transporters. And we've discussed this for a while,
That can kill
so I'm
you.
not going to discuss that again. It
If
can
I
kill you.
mean, yeah, I mean, if a large transporter defaults, it can kill you because your gross margins are so low. They're going to be defaulting on the entire amount, and it's going to be brutal for your business.
Yeah, I mean, the only option is then you have to pump in that 2 or 3 crores that they've defaulted on, right? That's the only option. But anyway, a question that I have is, do banks fund setting up a petrol pump? My friend said that they usually don't fund setting up a petrol pump. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Banks are not really interested. They're only really interested if you have another line of business and you want to just set up a petrol pump as a also kind of thing, right? So banks are not really interested. I don't think there's a lot of equity, private equity investors that are interested in this. So yeah, but it is the kind of business that you set up and then you forget about it, right? And you're just getting cash on a regular basis. It's very predictable, and it makes sense in certain situations. And yeah, that is the economics of petrol pumps.